that's not gonna do.
What's not gonna do?
How out of focus we are.
I'm just gonna click at it until look at that. Just click, 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 click.
That's so. For those of you who don't know, on the video we were out of focus. Alex snaps his fingers and focuses. That's the official videographer technique.
That is what you do. And for those of you who don't watch on video that are podcasty and all those different things, well, that meant nothing to you.
Welcome to the guys drinking
We
tea.
just dashed from another meeting to this recording. So
and before I introduce the subject for the day, I need some opinions. So Alex, I brought him this tea, this teacup.
And if you're podcasting again, this will mean nothing.
Large, purpley, pinkish flower on this very flowery teacup, which he got, by the way.
Yeah.
This is the cup I got him. And then he said, no, I can't use that cup because it's too flowery. And so he goes and gets this other cup, almost identical floweriness.
It's not identical.
Okay, so the flowers are more in the muted tones.
They're more masculine tones.
He said, I can't drink out of that other teacup because it's way too... He's like, I'm too... Oh, he said,
I'm too macho.
I'm too macho for that.
I say with my long hair and my manicured appearance.
So anyway, there's enough... no more fun. Business.
Because today we're actually going to tell you to sell all your possessions and take up a life of...
Beginning of this thing, like we usually check in and we prepare for this vigorously for about 3.5 minutes. And during that, I said, okay, what are we trying to communicate to people today? To which Alex said, it's about identity. And he said, and maybe you resonate with this. Maybe, he said, one of the reasons it's so hard to find our identity in Christ, in God, is because he's invisible. And I was like, okay, cool, yes. That's sort of, maybe you feel that. And we'll talk about that. But then I asked him, okay, so then what are we going to recommend they do to overcome this challenge? And he's just said, sell all your possessions. I was like, all right, fine, let's just start the podcast.
So let's just start the podcast. So there is a story where Jesus meets a man who comes to him and says, let me follow you, which with some leniency in a first century context includes, let me place my identity in you, let me get involved in what you're doing, all of those different things. I'm going to take you, Jesus, and what you teach as the center of everything I am. And Jesus says to him, first go sell everything you have. The man was very rich, it turns out. First go and sell everything you have, give to the poor, and then come follow me. So that with Jesus, there is a practice of telling people to do that very difficult thing. Just go, sell everything you have, and give to the poor.
So that'll help you with your identity, and end of show.
End of show, done. We've been getting complaints that we talk for too long, and now we're going to talk for that minimal amount. So I think...
So wait, I just feel how serious are you by this sell all your possessions thing?
I am not saying everyone should go sell all their possessions, but I think...
But that's what you said. Sorry, I'm being I'm so combative today. What's my deal?
I said it was a joke. Somewhat of a joke. It might not be a joke for everybody, but I think...
Yeah.
So I do think what I said was not that it's hard to place our identity in God because he's invisible. I said because he's intangible. And that could be a semantic thing, but I think there are so many things that for us are visible and tangible. So those become the things that we place our identity in. Even when you think about something like you can place your identity in where you're from. I'm wrestling with this a little bit at the moment because...
Don't let the cat out of the bag.
I'm British, in case you didn't realize, in case I hadn't talked about it enough. And so I actually have to decide in the next couple of months, do I do my citizenship? Do I become American? Now, I can still be British. I can keep both, but there is a lessening. Or do I just re-up my green card and say, hey, I'm a missionary living in foreign lands? Which do I do? And so that identity, while Britishness is maybe a little bit intangible, every time I get back onto British soil, there is a tangibleness of I feel like I'm stepping into home. Right now, the Queen is sick, and there's a possibility she may pass away. There's a loss there. like there's a feeling of relationship, and then when something happens that's very British, I feel a distance. So there's a tangibleness to all of those things, even something that you might get identity in, like being from a specific nation. We can show off the family, we can show off the car, we can show off the house. It's there, and it's bricks, and it's mortar, or it's wheels, and it's metal, and it's people. And so when we say place your identity in God only, which for those of you that weren't there on Sunday, that was the language we kind of landed on. Like, your identity only belongs in Jesus, nothing else.
And the phrase you used is this idea of, partially coming out of Henry Nouwen's comments, but it's some of the language you used is this: you are a beloved child. You are a beloved child.
Uh-huh.
You are a beloved child. That's sort of the language. In Henry Nouwen context, is from the baptism story, right? I'm well pleased.
But that so that if we can take that as an ideal, say that's where we should get to, that's where we want our identity to land. Like, that's that's our hope. Think about all the other things you can place identity in, and when is it ever enough? Like, I don't know that it ever is. I don't know that you ever get to a place with other things and say, that's enough for me. There's a suggestion from Henry Nouwen. If you can land on this as your identity, everything else pales into comparison. You can rest in that space. But I think when I think about other things that I might put identity in, I bought my first house when I was 37. I was pretty late, actually. And it's, I mean, I would never, it's Denver, so it's expensive. It's Highlands Ranch anyway, like, expensive place to live. So I bought a $500,000 house. I would never have thought that I would buy a house for that much money. And yet quite often I'll see other houses and I'm like, oh, that's a nicer house than my house. Like, that's a bigger house than my house. That's a whatever house than my house. And so you think about, like, that weird, like, switch. The thing that you thought you would never do is now potentially not enough, if that's your identity. Anyway, there's a saying, like, what's a millionaire's favorite million that he makes? And the answer is the next one. It's the next one. It's like there's always another thing, always another stack of cash to throw in the pile.
So I suspect that there's probably two different kinds of listeners out there. One, they still are maybe skeptical of our premise that these other identities won't satisfy. Like, they're head on pursuing some sort of identity. They may not even consciously say it that way, whether it's career or education or money or fitness or what else could we name? And they're like, if I can achieve this level of something in this identity space, then I will be satisfied. Then there's others out there who, like, right off the bat, they're right with us. Like, I've been there, I've done that, I tried this, I tried this, I tried this, and it all, maybe I'm even in the middle of it. Like, I'm in the middle of the career that I always wanted, making amounts of money that I had only imagined, and it's still not satisfactory. Speak to that first group a little bit. Convince them that it's a dead end. and it's what there's two, pop their bubble.
Let's get a needle and so there's two possibilities, right? There's a possibility that you can convince someone that that's not possible. Like, you could say, like, look, anecdotally, find me a piece of evidence of in your own life or somebody else's life of someone who's genuinely achieved something and said, now I am happy, or now I am complete, or now my identity is secure. It just anecdotally, it's not true. Like, the number of people that you read that are rich and famous, the two things that we crave, I think, and there's this actually interesting shift. There was a poll recently. They took a bunch of kids coming up in this generation, probably under our generation, but before our kids' generation, and they gave them some words and said, which of these are important to you? And the percentage to which fame has increased as the goal is incredible compared to 20, 30, 40, 50 years
Thank
ago.
you, TikTok, YouTube.
TikTok, YouTube, all these different things. You can get your 15 minutes. You can be famous for being famous. Like that that's now a
I
reality
want my
and now a
career
desire.
it to be that I'm awesome.
Yeah,
and everyone knows
absolutely.
about it.
Yeah. The fact that you can now have someone like Justin Bieber who became who he is because of a YouTube video, or something similar. He did a recording and it just blew up. Suddenly he's on talk shows at 7 years old. So find those people, or look at those people and find any of them that are honestly expressing genuine rest in identity, and it just doesn't exist. Like Russell Brand is a great example. Like became a huge, and he talks through his journey into fame and what that looked like. And he said the moment he knew he was famous was some of his friends went to a Smiths concert. I don't know if Smiths really made it over here. They were huge in England, but he went to, and Morrissey does his bit where he introduces all the band, and he introduces his drummer, guitarist, and then instead of saying, "And I'm Morrissey," he says, "And I'm Russell Brand." And he said all his friends started texting him. It was this moment of, "You're genuinely famous now." And he said he had this moment where it really meant a lot. He was like, "Morrissey knows who I am. This is a big deal." And then there was this moment where he was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, like that doesn't actually mean anything." And so he's gone through this big, you might almost call it a deconstruction. He threw away his phone and got a new one and a new number. And he only saved like 10 phone numbers. And it's like, all these rich and famous people that knew who I was. What if they've been calling me? What if Spielberg's been calling, saying, "Do you want to play this role?" or something like that? Mm-hmm. But he's realized the emptiness of it. And so both the lack
and that's
of,
a story that we've
over and
seen
over.
told over and over. But before we continue, I just have to point out that Alex just spilled his tea.
I
And
didn't have to point
last
that out
week,
for all
he
the
promised that a Brit would never spill tea.
completely
I
forgot
couldn't
I
help.
said that.
I mean, I know that that's a completely deviating from the flow of thought.
It's
that we may
fine.
never recover
We
from
might
it.
never.
But I just feel so much better. I spilled tea last week, and he mocked me incessantly.
And of course, when I said it last week, it was a lie.
I know. So,
yeah.
but like the story of like Miley Cyrus, of Justin Bieber, of you name it, these characters, these they become characters, right? They have this season of like youthful fame. They rise, they go off the deep end, and they like all these stories about what they're up to and the crazy wacky things that they do with their money and their fame and all this stuff. And then usually there's like some sort of circling back to something core ish.
Yeah.
But they're always like a broken, shattered something of themselves. And like they may come back and make it big in the scene or whatever, but there's always like this weird journey of like trying to figure out what in the world I am.
So there, what I'm intrigued by there, and I don't have an answer to this, maybe you do.
Always.
So I would suggest that somewhere the idea central to the passage of, and I used that quote, that Klein Snodgrass quote, if Scripture is trying to give us an identity, and it very much is. It's very much pushing this for the Old Testament when they were given the law. Really, it was an identity thing. This is what God's people look like. They look like people that do these things. In the New Testament, it's very much this is what the people of Jesus look like. And there's all of these different markers for that. But it's people that are rooted in Jesus as the source and the center of everything. So I think that's the argument of the whole of Scripture. Like this is what you need to place your identity in. I'm intrigued for those people that are not sure that's true, which I can totally understand. Are there some things that are better than others to put your identity in? So we've talked about fame for a little bit. Somewhere there seems to be some very famous people, some very rich people that may not be followers of Jesus, but have grounded themselves in something that seems better than nothing. Like even perhaps family is one of those things. Mm-hmm. You see those people that, you know, they may be on stage, they made all these things, and they go happily back to their wife and 2 kids and their dog and their house, and it seems like there's something better at least there maybe than just nothing. But even that thing will disappear eventually and can't be relied on completely. The kids will move out, the dog will die. All of those different things will eventually happen. And so somewhere there's a loss of identity when that takes place. I think maybe the beautiful thing about the Jesus-centered identity, it's the only thing that doesn't disappear. on you.
It's literally untouchable.
Oh.
Nothing in this world, nothing in the spiritual world can take that away from you.
Yeah. Yes.
What else in the universe can we say is like that?
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. So I'm not sure. Like, I think there's probably bad, better, best somewhere. Like,
I think so. And actually, even if you're that character that's sort of like, no, I'm not convinced. At least I want to try. I know a million other people have tried to find their identity and career and failed, but I'm gonna give my best shot.
Yes.
If that's still where you are, if you actually zoom back out and just look at even Hollywood, Hollywood's portrayal of the millionaire making it all up, like, they're the villain, even in Hollywood. Even if the characters acting these parts out are trying to live into that dream.
Yes.
The person who makes it all about the fame and not about the friendship, all about the career rather than about the family. Like, those are the villains in Hollywood movies. Like, there is an intuition even in our very humanity and souls that have guided humanity to know this. On a silver screen, we know that that's the bad guy. And then ask yourself, am I that guy?
Am I the guy? Yeah. So then there's the step beyond that, I think, probably somewhere, which is to ground in things that are somewhat healthy. There's the movie Big Fish, Ewan McGregor's character in that. He's this wonderful storyteller, got all of these things that he tells as these great stories, and they're all somewhat got a basis in truth, but they're enlarged. But his son, as an adult grown up, is convinced his father had this love affair with another woman that wasn't his mother. And he actually goes and hunts her down because he's like, my father was a philanderer, he was a traveler, he was all of these different things. And so he finally tracks this woman down. Helena Bonham Carter is the actress, and he says to her, so I know you and my father had this thing. And she looks at him and she says, oh, no, if only. I would have loved that. But the problem was, to your father, there were only two women in the world, your mother and everybody else. And it just, like, somewhere this guy, this larger-than-life character with all of the riches that he'd acquired through his work, through all of the experiences that had grounded very much in, no, I am a man who loves one woman, and that was his identity. So I would suggest somewhere, yes, there's probably a betterness to that than the identity of, I'm going to sleep with as many people as possible, I'm going to make as much money as possible and spend it on all the things that give me some vague sense of pleasure, all those different things. And yet even that marriage, at some moment, there'll be the moment where one person's there and the other person's not anymore.
Yes.
That's this inevitability.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is a scale, and I think we could take a way too long of a podcast to try and define what that scale is biblically, of what, even completely apart from Christ, if you were to find your identity in some things, there's lesser evils than others, but they all are empty, and they're all grounded in entropy, in the world's coming apart, people pass away, relationships change, your age happens, and suddenly your kids move away. All of these things still have access to wreck your identity.
Absolutely, yes. So the illustration I used at some point, and I think I stole it off another pastor at some point, but was of a bubble maker. It produces all of these bubbles. These electric ones you set going with the batteries, and it just fires bubbles off into the air. There's some bubbles that might be more noble than others, or seem to be, but they are all still bubbles. And my wife is a bubble, and my kids are bubbles, and my house is a bubble, and all of those different things. And somewhere there's the bubble maker, which is central. And somewhere in the illustration that reflects God, and that's the only thing that lasts. So there's, and I also think there's this weird insidious danger to the noble identity, if we can characterize it as that.
Yes, I wanted to get to that.
That like the guy who, or the girl that does all of the stuff we just characterized as, I'm going off all over the place, doing all of these different things. I just do whatever I want. The Russell Brand type guy. Eventually, that person has the potential to wake up and say, this is a mess, and I desperately need the thing that grounds, the thing that the identity can rest on. He even suggests in one of his books, everyone has an addiction to something. I'm just so broken, I'm going to figure out what my addiction is far earlier than you're going to figure out what yours is.
So the passage that Alex preached out, if you weren't there, was the prodigal son story.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to get to that and talk what you're
While only doing 30 minutes, which is
exactly
gives us 10 minutes.
Exactly. But I also kind of want to get into some of our own personal stories and wrestlings with identity, because I think that would be helpful for people to hear. But you talked about this. So what you just said, Russell Brand was like the prodigal, right?
The younger son. Yeah, he's the.
But you also referenced the elder son, and you didn't have a ton of time to unpack this whole world there. But that's what you're talking about. The elder son is the commendable one. He's the one that stayed with the father. He's the one that worked the fields.
Yeah.
He's the one who didn't do the bad thing, and that was his identity. And at the end of the story, ironically, he's sort of the villain because there's a cliffhanger. Will he go into the party and celebrate his lost brother? And so which son has the advantage at the end of that story? The broken one who knows it.
Definitely. Yeah.
Not the one who's like, I'm awesome. I'm the better son.
I was in the fields all day, making it happen. This estate is built on my hard work. Yeah.
So, like, dipping into my own story a little bit, between my brother and I, in some ways, we've lived the prodigal son story in some ways. And like, my brother had some seasons of his life where he wasn't doing the things that he always should do. And then I was always the glory boy. Like, I'm going to go to Bible college. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to do.
You've got that aura of glory boy.
Like, parents tell me what to do and I'll do it. I was that kid, but in my soul, I was rotting in the sense that I was wrapped up in self-righteousness. I was wrapped up in pride. I was wrapped up in all these things, and because I surrounded myself with Christian people, the activities that I did to please them looked really good on the outside. But I had motivations that were still driven by brokenness and sin and pride and arrogance and pursuit of power, all of these different things. And then in different ways, God broke me and then broke my brother. And when we came back, I was like, he's actually further out in front of me.
Wow.
In many ways, because he's like, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I need Jesus. And so when I look at his life, he just has a more honest perspective about his own character and stuff. And he just knows. It took me a long time to even recognize I need Jesus because I was killing it without him.
Yes. Oh, that's such a good phrase.
What about
I think I would say I fit more into. I don't know that I have the direct comparison with brothers. Like, my brother is, I think he would, and I would both say he's probably a bit more cynical in his thinking at times than I am. So he's the suspicious one.
Yeah.
And I'm the optimist. Like, I'm always like, the glass isn't half full. Like, the glass is overflowing. Like, you know, and my brother's a little bit more like, are you sure there's a glass? Like, we have that tendency between us.
That's great.
So we really love each other. We're not the most similar in some of our thinking, and then yet we are in some of our like love of humor and different things. So we've got some similarities there. He was the one that would always be more questioning, I think. And I was the one on the surface that looked like he was just yes. But I was a bit more sneaky, I think. I had all of these different things going on in different parts of my world. I lived very much the duplicitous life, I felt. Like, I was the one still sitting in church at 16.
Looked like the elder
child.
Yeah.
That could answer all the questions. But was really just waiting to go hang out with friends who were going off drinking or whatever. Or just, you know. So I think I was a little bit more... It gave me some awareness of how broken I was when I got... So I went through that real phase that your brother went through, it sounds like, of just like, oh man, I'm a mess. I wonder if there's even grace for someone who's had a chance at grace and just really just treated it as nothing. So I went through a bunch of stuff with that. And that was a really hard identity shift for me. There was this sort of question of, I believe that God loves people that are broken, but does he love people that were supposed to be mended? and went out and broke themselves and now want to be fixed again? Like, can the prodigal that's the question of grace, right? Can the prodigal do the same thing again and still find grace? What happens if after everything in the story, he's like, he goes to the older brother, he's like, hey, can I have some of your money now? And off he goes.
So all right, you can't ask the question and not try and answer it.
No, what do you mean? It's my. I asked the question. This is your question to answer.
Whoa.
So I think the scandal of grace is that yes, he can. That somewhere Jesus says to Peter 70 times 7.
Yeah, and even in the book of Romans, like Paul has this little bit: shall we go on in sinning that grace may abound? May it never be. But I think embedded in the fact that Paul had to write that, he said, if your grace isn't big enough that you're like, maybe I could. If that's not your perspective of grace, is that if you've never asked yourself, maybe I could just do whatever I want and I'd still get forgiven, then your grace probably isn't big enough.
Yes. Yeah,
to
absolutely.
demand that next question.
And one of the questions I used to ask myself is, when people heard me preach, Paul pushes it almost to the point of saying, like, he's not, no one could accuse him of saying it's better that we sin all the more that grace may abound if he wasn't coming somewhere close to saying something like that. I mean, he's getting like pretty far out there. And I always would ask myself, would people hear that from me?
Yeah.
So I think, and I had this tension moment, and maybe that's someone listening who knows, in trying to return, feeling like I was being pulled back towards Jesus, started reading the Bible and would come across phrases in Hebrews chapter 6, chapter 11, like if once you've known grace and sinned, and just feel this terror. And it actually took me some serious maturity to get to a point of saying, what is the writer trying to do there? Is his goal to make people feel like they might have sinned to a point of hopelessness? Or is his goal to say, show that you're not those people? Like, show that you are, like, choose the right pathway. So there was a peacefulness that came over me then eventually of just realizing, I was a teenager that understood a lot of the technicals, but had never really experienced grace. Now I wonder, there's the semantics of could people do the same? Could the prodigal do the same again? The implication of the story is the grace he receives is so good and so dramatic that seems unlikely in the story.
Totally.
And yet I think there's always space.
And if we're honest, if I'm honest, there's been times where I'm like, man, I might have reached 70 times 70.
Yeah. And I have a guy that I went to church with years ago, and he was an ex-drug addict, and I remember him telling me, and it was a big shift for him. He went to a funeral of a guy that he'd been through rehab with, and the guy had died with a needle in his arm after the rehab, after preaching, after all the different things. And he said, I went to the funeral, and the guy leading it was talking about it's wonderful, now he's at peace, now he's with Jesus, all of these different things. And he said, I went up to the guy afterwards and said, do you think that's true? He went back to drugs, he went back to those things. And he said, my friend looked at me and said, like, he made a mistake, treat it for what it is, like, trust in grace. And I was like, that for him was a big learning thing, I think, of in his own life, maybe, of there's no room for mistakes anymore. That's no way to live. There's no way to live like so fearful. That's the passage I used at the end of this week, I think, like that there is no fear in love.
And I think that's also Paul's argument in Romans when he talks about this extreme grace. I think he's part of what he's trying to do is get at the invitation of the scriptures towards righteousness and right living and all those sorts of things. They're invitations to greater avenues of wholeness and thriving as human beings. Because of the cross and because of grace, the whole, like, where do I have to go to the hot place or the cool, the better, that's off the table.
Yeah.
Because of the cross. But then there's a whole bunch of other things that in life that are invitations to grow and to access the goodness of the kingdom of God and all those sorts of things. So a couple more comments as we wrap up, or a couple questions.
Because I still think we've not really covered that other category. Like you started with the 2 categories. What if you like, I desperately want to not put my identity in those things? What do I do?
Okay.
And I'm asking you that question.
The other category being that I've been there and I've found that it's empty.
I want my identity to be in Jesus, but all these other things just keep coming up. Like, what does that person do? Tell me what to do.
Well, one, I think it's helpful. I think, as a diagnostic tool to recognize that everything you do stems from the identity that you're choosing. Identity is the engine in your body and in your soul that makes you do things. And so that's just a helpful thing to help you diagnose what my identity is in. And if you're like one great way I see this in my own life is when I get really angry at something, I'm like, there's actually an identity in me that's being threatened.
Oh, yeah.
And therefore, I'm angry, trying to protect my identity in some way, shape, or form. And as you do that throughout your life and your walk with Jesus, I think then you start to realize that the only one that's untouchable, and the invitation is, how do you get out of this vicious cycle, is you realize that nothing you do or say, nothing, like no matter how awesome you are or how terrible you are, can touch the reality of who God says you are.
Yeah, I love that. So I think my sort of thing that I would place alongside that is, I recognize for me a lot of the other identity pieces, they can be driven by vanity quite a lot, which is broadly what other people think about you.
Yeah.
So I remember I had this moment. It was really weird. I was, whenever we go up to the lake, I love driving boats. And I'd love to be a really great boat driver. I don't know why. Like, and I really want my kids to be really great boat drivers.
Is there such thing as a good boat driver?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, carry on.
It's a complicated.
I don't want to get off the rails, but I have questions about that.
I just love driving boats, and I love and I was watching my kids start to drive for the first time. And I was like, I really want them to be really great boat drivers too. And I was like, why? Why do I think that matters at all? Specifically for them. And I said, is there like a suspicion for me that them being able to do that well reflects well on me somewhere? That they had a father that would teach them how to do something like that? And I'm like, that it was just this weird like foray into just exploring the brokenness that all of us have in different ways. I'm taking a really stupid example kind of intentionally, because there's probably some more fundamental things that I don't want to own to, maybe.
Let's talk about... No, I'm just joking.
Maybe one that I am willing to go is I think we all want our kids to be good looking. And then the question is why? And the answer is maybe, well, because people find them attractive, because they'll have advantages in life that go along with being good looking, because that's a reality. Like, it goes with promotion, it goes with all these different things. It like, and yet, is it possible that actually having looks is a really damaging thing in some ways, that actually can cause some real problems that we don't acknowledge at times? And so I think there is something about us that we long for certain things for our kids. And I'm always curious as to why. And I think vanity is just this almost unspoken big thing in the lives of followers of Jesus that we rarely get to because we're so busy talking about so many other things. And yet I just wonder how many of that is
one of the 7 deadly sins.
It is, and I just I'm someone who's willing to wrestle with it. Like I quite often will ask myself, like, why does it matter to me how people think I dress, or all those different things? Jesus seems like he's not interested in those things, and yet for 3 years is compelling to people and transformative in their lives in a way that's so much longer lasting. For 3 years, his identity is firmly rooted in "I am a beloved child." Now, it seems like the alternative to that is just to become gently a weirdo, like to just suddenly walk out the house looking like you got dressed in the dark, essentially.
Yeah.
Like and you stop cleaning your teeth because who needs teeth, or you stop washing because who needs to wash. So I'm sure there's a balancing point there somewhere. But I'm just curious as to what gives us identity and how much of it links to that deeper thing.
Gosh, at the risk of going a little over, I think that the irony of some of those decisions between like, okay, we shouldn't care about our appearance, and then going off the deep end that way, like I'd never wash anymore, the most important thing is what Jesus, there is this pendulum that could happen. But the weird thing is like, okay, as a self-confessing elder brother, the weird thing is like a lot of the activities, when my soul was driven by the praise of the righteous people around me, I did a lot of activities that looked really good to the Christian world. And then as God started to unroot that idolatry and that wrong motive, that wrong identity for me, first of all, you get a lot of good stuff done. I did a lot of really good stuff with that terrible motivation.
And there's probably some good like stuff that you do now that's only possible because of all that stuff as well.
Absolutely. So there was a season where I was like, I've taken one engine out of my soul and I've yet to put a new one in, and I just didn't have any motivation.
Wow. And
I was like, so what am I going to... And I knew the right one. I wanted to be in him. But the irony is, for some people, if they don't know me super well and they're just observing my life from a distance, nothing changed. Some of the activities are identical. But, like or for the example you just gave, like someone who's like, well, my physical appearance isn't my most important thing anymore. I'm still going to get up and shower. Why? Because it's respectful to certain people, because I want to participate in a well-functioning society and stuff. But my motivation is to be engaging with people and not be off-putting, or you may just find a different engine that drives you to do those activities than you used to have. And I think that's the weird thing about this whole thing of identity is it may look on the outside identical, but the inside is so much more life-giving and joyful and less pressure. It's more like, I'm going to get up and I'm going to do the right thing, not because I need their praise, but I'm going to do it because I actually like to.
So somewhere it feels like a healthy step for all of us is, how to phrase this, it's to invite Jesus into the conversation each and every day. I was intrigued. I saw some pictures recently of an untouched tribe encountering Westerners for the first time, and they took photos, and I was watching how those people posed for photos, and what was incredible is they didn't pose for photos. The guys stood with like their pot bellies just kind of hanging out. There was no like tightening the abs. They didn't smile. They just stared like peacefully at the camera. There was a complete, they were living true to themselves in front of the camera, whereas we pose for the camera. And somewhere I think there's so much in our life that is posing for the world. And somewhere Jesus invites us into a conversation between he and us that is more internal and more questioning around, well, why? Why do I feel like I need this? Why is this so important to me? And I think that's always, to me, the thing I come back to as beautiful about the Jesus journey is that so many of us treat that as he's just really interested in you fixing this and getting it all figured out. And yet, in actual fact, the Jesus that we come across in Scripture is one who longs to walk with us in the journey, who may ask hard things at times. Yeah. May say, give all your stuff and give it to the poor. Yeah. But he's inviting us into this process. So even just a prayer that begins, God, I am deeply suspicious that I have identity in so many other things. I long for that to be in you. you and I are going to have to work on that together.
Totally.
Seems like a starting point.
Totally. Yeah.
That is good and healthy.
Great.
And who knows what he'll show? Who knows what he'll show you? Like maybe I'm gonna have to go give away some stuff. I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows? Or you may start doing similar things, but from a totally different soul perspective. Yeah.
And if you feel called to give away your money, well,
Alex is volunteering. Alex is volunteering to be on the receiving end.
It's got to go somewhere.
And on that note,
thanks for joining us, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all. Comment, like, if you have questions, if you've wrestled with this yourself, let us know. Oh, there was actually some comments that were really, really insightful from our last episode.
Yes.
I just love that. We don't have time to go into them now, but thank you for commenting, for being so thoughtful. I love that.
Yeah, brilliant. Love it.
Bye.
Thanks.